Millions of kids have grown up playing soldier. You remember? But now playing soldier has become something to do for adults. And tonight, Mark Coogan begins a special series on the growing phenomenon of war games. Mark?
Well, anytime you mention guns or the military, there will be people who like those subjects and people who will not. It is in that setting that war games have gone from being a small-scale hobby to an outdoor craze that's being used in some cases as a corporate morale booster like the company picnic. We start tonight with an e-ticket extravaganza 2 Saturdays back.
Okay, you got it. You got it, Gunner. All right, buddy.
This is not Vietnam, not Central America. It is Riverside County near Lake Elsinore, and it is just a game.
Here.
The combatants are dressed-up civilians, men and women. The helicopter assault is an elaborate and hair-raising stunt staged to spice up what was called the Big One Part 2. Flying into the mock battle made this the ultimate war game.
My squad, let's do it! We're gonna be alive!
The armies this Saturday were divided between nearly 1,100 players. The weapons were compressed air guns shooting marble-sized balls of paint. The game was a variation of the old Capture the Flag, a kid's game turned into an adult's fantasy. On any weekend in Southern California, from 5,000 to 10,000 people are playing war. From one playing field 4 years ago, today there are from 30 to 40. It's a macho game, but in this variety of combat, girls play too.
What's
Why?
it like
Yeah.
for a girl?
For anybody.
For a girl, it's like the being in the locker room that you never get to be in, you know?
$20 usually can get anyone in for a day's worth, but serious players can spend hundreds of dollars on their own equipment. One more reason why this is called the yuppie sport.
And the only scenario behind the whole thing is the bigger the boys, the bigger the toys.
Playing the game is intense, man hunting man, but without the fear of death. Those paintballs, though, are fired at 200 miles per hour. Eye goggles are mandatory, but the pellets sting anyway.
Good.
You okay?
Yeah.
When you hear that paintball whizzing by your head, making that sound, man, that gets the adrenaline flowing.
Just playing in general is the greatest rush.
And I'm just having a blast. I think they got me hooked.
No doubt players happily would plead guilty to adult delinquency. Missteps are as much a part of the game as dreams of glory, like... But here are the seeds of controversy. Should they be closed down?
I think that, yes, they should be closed down. We're promoting a red, white, and blue Rambo patriotism and promoting violence by them.
I'm not a psychologist. I would imagine there's probably a very tiny percentage of people for whom this isn't a positive experience. But I think most people are out here having fun. And this isn't war. This isn't violence. This is having fun.
There's no dead bodies out there. We all came back alive.
War games players go to great lengths to explain they are ordinary people, not bloodthirsty gun freaks. That instead they have hit on a new adventure that both releases aggressions and builds team spirit. That this is just a game. On the East Coast and in Canada, where the paint gun game started, there has been occasional trouble with local governments overstaging the games, but there has been none here. Tomorrow, more about this hit activity 11 years after Vietnam, 13 years after the end of the draft.
And get all dressed up like commandos to go out and hunt each other with paint guns, then you know that times have changed drastically from the anti-Vietnam 1960s. In the second part of his special report tonight on war games, Mark Coogan looks at the controversy over what lessons war games are teaching people. Mark.
And the war games try to recreate the excitement of combat without the reality of injury and death. But critics charge the games are making war an acceptable option in real life. But maybe recent history has not been forgotten after all.
It is my duty to the American people.
Those words in 1964 meant the United States was going to war in Vietnam. Before the U.S. got out 11 years later, 58,000 American servicemen and women had been killed. At home, the country was turned inside out. Draft card burning underlined opposition to military service. Times change. It suddenly has become popular to engage in mock warfare with guns that shoot paint pellets. Up to 10,000 Southern Californians make war on weekends. This exercise was a special War Games promotion staged on November 15th with over 1,000 participants. But life is full of coincidences. At the exact same time this was going on, the so-called Great Peace March was ending in Washington. If that protest looked like the 60s, then there was Nicaragua the same Saturday, where American soldier of fortune Eugene Hassenfuss was being sentenced to 30 years for terrorism. Do the War Games form another piece of the same puzzle? The critics, who think the fantasy battles breed an acceptance of war, say yes.
The weapons that they use out there are paint guns. They shoot a paint pellet, which doesn't do bodily injury at that time, but what type of mentality are we putting into the people that participate in that? Not that they necessarily are going to go home and take a shotgun and go out and shoot up the corner 7-Eleven, but is an acceptance of violence just as insidious.
But among the players at the War Games promotion November 15th, we found not only a desire to defend the games, but also an appreciation of events past and possibly future.
A lot of people who play this are in their mid-30s, were Vietnam-era kids, and we grew up with a lot of guilt about anything having to do with violence. And so getting into this, it's kind of, for a lot of people, it's like a contradiction that the experience of dressing up in uniforms and playing on a team and many of the things associated with this are different from the experience of war and carnage and killing and violence. They can be two separate things. And war isn't fun, and hurting people isn't fun, but this is, and this is something separate.
When I got shot twice. I got injured once and I got killed. If that was real war, I'd have been gone. It's like that, and this is only 2 hours.
There's no way you can prepare people for combat. You know, there's a big difference between combat and what they're doing out there. And with the paint pellets.
As a 19-year-old draftee, Bob Duncan went from cruising Van Nuys Boulevard to the jungle in Vietnam.
When the stuff hit the fan, it totally broke loose. It was pure terror. A lot of yelling and screaming, and nothing very romantic about any of it.
The players in the War Games, certainly the older ones, say they have things sorted out. If anything, they say, these fantasy brushes with death have taught them they want no part of the real thing.
A lot of us would rather get hit with a paint pellet and put up with a bruise than put up with a bullet hole anytime.
If we were involved in actual war right now that was publicized, I think there would be a different attitude with War Games. In that, actually, I think people would have a more negative image with War Games.
But you'd never, ever want to do the real thing, ever. It just becomes unthinkable.
Two stories that illustrate the War Games phenomenon. We heard about two women this past weekend who canceled plans to go to an art museum to go to a War Games field instead. They said they enjoyed it. On the downside, we heard yesterday from an angry woman who was riding her horse through a county park when she was surprised recently by a squad of men in camouflage who said they were practicing for War Games and didn't want to drive to Palmdale. Tomorrow night, we'll look at where it's all headed.
California. But where is the War Games phenomenon really headed? Mark Coogan with a special report on that coming.
We've been telling you about the War Games phenomenon in Southern California, where people put on camouflage and battle each other with paint guns. It's like a second childhood for a lot of folks, but like any child, the War Games craze is having growing pains right now. Tonight, Mark Coogan wraps up his special reports on War Games. Mark.
And from one War Games field in the Southland 4 years ago to at least 30 fields now, hosting thousands of weekend combatants, the popularity of War Games has amazed even its organizers. So what's next? We'll start looking by going indoors. In a nondescript warehouse in Gardena is the new wave in War Games. Men who might be playing softball or racquetball after work instead are armed with paint pistols, ducking around a mock-up city landscape, shooting at each other.
Rock and roll, rock and roll.
The pace is fast and furious. The paintballs fly at 150 miles per hour. The objective is to shoot everyone on the other team. Tonight's urban commandos are from a Baptist church in Torrance.
The people would think that we'd get a lot of folks in that are survivalists or real big on firearms, and I'm sure we do get some people like that. But the bulk of it's made up of just your everyday Joe on the street that is looking for a fun game that's challenging.
It's a lot of fun. It gets you sweating, gets you going. It gets you moving, your adrenaline going. You know, before I came over here tonight, I was dead tired from work. And once I got here and started going right here, I'm wide awake, ready to go another couple hours.
First one came right across my finger, and man alive, I thought I ripped my fingernail off, but now you look at it and it's fine. This one here, I didn't hardly feel at all. It just kind of glanced, but you got to get a look at it. I think it's probably a direct hit. Seeing the oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, sure, I'm on your team, so go ahead and laugh.
But there are critics of war games who charge thrill-seeking like this corrodes the thrill seeker.
Are we condoning violence? We certainly have a society that says that we want to stop crime, we want to stop violence, and yet we're actually going out and making a game of killing people.
It seems like a safe form of aggression to me. There have been a number of psychological studies done on the matter, and it's done a lot for corporations that have a small group of people that don't seem to get along together, and they throw them in one of these paint games as a team, and all of a sudden they have instant camaraderie.
War games of all kinds exploded in popularity in Southern California this past summer, spawning an instant industry with its own specialty stores and its own magazine, 10,000 issues a month. A spin-off of war games, laser tag, is the current Christmas shopping hit, although purists dismiss this as real kid stuff. The outdoor game itself may be at a crossroads. Organizers admit with up to 10,000 players in the Southland, keeping control is crucial. The safety factor is paramount. A paintball hit this player in the face, fairly common. Goggles are mandatory, and all players sign liability waivers. But in August, a $2 million lawsuit was filed against a field in Malibu. A player claimed he suffered permanent eye damage when a paintball shattered his rented goggles.
People can't waive negligence, and if in fact they are conducting their activity in a negligent fashion, the waiver is meaningless.
And always dogging the game will be the underlying question of whether it's a healthy outlet for aggression or the breeding ground of something sinister.
Our boys are brought up playing cowboys and Indians, playing military games, and really what does that prepare them for? Does it prepare them for promoting peace? No, it prepares them for going off and participating in wars.
I don't care what it is, whether it's chess or backgammon or tennis. It's all a type of warfare. It's a contest between two groups or two sets of people or something like that.
There are limits on how big war games can get, from insurance costs to the unwillingness of people to get hit by a flying paint pellet at close range. And then there's the ultimate outside factor. As one player told us, a real war, he said, would make playing soldier real unattractive.
This one has really brought out the opinions, pro and con, one side or the other. No in between, really.
Yeah.
Thank you. Interesting series, Mark. Okay.